What's going on, Summoners? Welcome to another ProGuides video. It's a new patch, and that means we got to give you some more builds to try. I'm Kangas, and in this video, I'm running you through all the builds that you need to be trying out. Whether they're sleeper builds or the new trending ones from Korea, we're covering them here. So hit that sub button, and let's get right into it. To kick things off, let's go over the top lane. Our first build is for none other than Lee Sin top. No, you're not crazy, I did say Lee Sin. The pick has been mentioned here and there in the upper echelons of solo queue, and you might have even heard a streamer or one of your high elo friends talking about it, but it is still a very underrated pick that doesn't see that much play. Well, that is compared to his jungle play rate at least. The pick is good. At worst, it's hard not to find success if you're just landing your Qs. Lee Sin has received so many buffs this season and has gotten to the point where he's actually just a self-sufficient solo laner now. Although there is an option to build full assassin, the build that we're focusing on is a bruiser build that provides you plenty of durability without sacrificing damage in return. For runes, you'll run Conqueror, Triumph, Legend Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Bone Plating, Revitalize, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and then your choice of a defensive rune. Following this are the items Gore Drinker, Defensive Boots, Sterix Gauge, Black Cleaver, Death Stance, and a Spirit Visage. Now you might be thinking, why would you ever pick Lee Sin top instead of the jungle? Well, the thing is, you don't really have to pick him in place of Lee Sin jungle. He is still a solid jungler, but the reason Lee Sin top is good is because, well, Lee Sin himself is just OP right now. Not only is he mobile, but he's also pretty tanky with this build, and he still deals a ridiculous amount of damage. The AD ratio in his ultimate is a straight up 2.0, meaning that in the mid to late game, you're always going to pose a threat to the enemy carries. If you're not insecting them into your team, you're probably just killing them by yourself with the full combo. One reason why Lee Sin does well in the top lane is that he also has built-in sustain. His W allows him to not only shield himself, but its second cast also provides him with some lifesteal which can be used to heal off of the minion wave. After level 6, his kill pressure is immense because his ultimate deals a ton of damage and guarantees a Q follow-up, barring human error or an enemy blocking it. Also, speaking of this pick, it's time for our question of the day. Do you have a favorite off-meta pick, and if so, who is it? I love off-meta picks because I just like seeing more diversity in League, and even though it used to be a support, I would consider Pantheon an off-meta support pick right now, and he's my go-to. But let me know your answer in the comments down below. And the next build we have for the top lane is for Karma. After several buffs, no surprise, Karma has also found herself in a similar situation. Once again, she's strong enough to find success as a solo laner, and we got a build that's gaining popularity in Korea. This build provides a mix of utility and damage, allowing you to fill the role as both a carry and still a supportive teammate. For runes, you'll want to run Grasp of the Undying, Shield Bash, Bone Plating, Revitalize, Biscuit Delivery, Cosmic Insight, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and then your choice of a defensive rune. Next up for items, you'll build Ionian Boots of Lucidity, Everfrost, Staff of Flowing Water, Zonia's Hourglass, Chemtech Putrefier, and Cosmic Drive. Karma's high Q damage has helped her build up a reputation as an oppressive lane bully. The lack of a true ultimate means that her 3 primary abilities are just slightly stronger, and access to her mantra means that her pre-level 6 is typically better than the run-of-the-mill champs. With all this combined, Karma has the tools necessary to find success in the top lane. She's got high poke damage, crowd control, sustain, and a shield that doubles as a movement speed boost. And that mantra W just provides that extra layer of safety in those near-death situations for Karma because she's able to heal for a huge chunk of her missing health. And one other strength of this specific build is you don't rely solely on your Q for poke. With Grasp of the Undying combined with Shield Bash, your basic attacks actually pack a serious punch. Unfortunately for the enemy, this means that dodging abilities alone will not be enough to win the lane. The fact that you have a reliable source of damage for basic attacks alongside some serious Q poke is enough to win a majority of your lane matchups. So that'll wrap up the top lane. Let's take one last look at the screen for a recap of those builds. Next up, let's run through the jungle. We got a couple of jungle builds to talk about, but let's start by talking about a pick that absolutely popped off and dominated last patch. Diana jungle got buffed, and oh boy, it has been a spectacle. My girl's done way more than expected, as she's an incredible jungler because of the safe, healthy, and pretty fast clear. Her ganks aren't all too bad either, as at the very least she has a gap closer with red buff to help her out, and it's not impossible for her to pull off a pre-level 6 gank. Diana's scaling is still great, and as a jungler, the fact that she can go anywhere at any time without having to worry about a lane opponent makes matters much worse for her opponents. Although nerfed a bit this patch, Diana jungle is still a pick that players should keep their eyes out for. For runes, you'll want to run Conqueror, Triumph, Legend Tenacity, Coup de Grace, Ravenous Hunter, Sudden Impact, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and Armor. For items, build Nashor's Tooth, Sork Shoes, Hextech Rocket Belt, Zonia's Hourglass, or Magi's if you're ahead, and then whichever one you didn't pick up, and finally round out the build with a Rabadon's Death Cap. This setup isn't out of the ordinary, but it'll provide a solid amount of damage, especially in extended fights as you stack up Conqueror. This build also provides a ton of AP, and while Magi's isn't typically a purchase for every game, you're solo queuing as a jungler. If you're not picking up kills, games are typically pretty hard anyway, and you might as well bank on it because it's so rewarding when you do manage to pull ahead. Another great part about Diana Jungle is that she's a mid lane flex pick, so if you're a mid lane main, it's definitely worth learning how to play her in the jungle. You might get autofilled, and being familiar with the champion is always helpful. Otherwise, you might want to swap into jungle and get out of a bad matchup if you lock in Diana early. This is where the power of a flex pick really comes into play. And our next jungle build is for Darius. He also got a nice little buff, and while he hasn't popped off quite as hard as Diana, he's gradually seen more and more play. Faster clear speed has paved the way for jungle Darius to start seeing more play, so let's run through our build for him. As a jungler, you'll unfortunately only have access to either Ghost or Flash, not both. So we suggest running Ghost, but feel free to experiment and see what you prefer. Regardless, for runes, you'll run Conqueror, Triumph, Legend Tenacity, Last Stand, Nimbus Cloak, Celerity, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and Armor. Next up, you'll build Stride Breaker, Defensive Boots, Steric's Gauge, Dead Man's Plate, Force of Nature, and a Spirit Visage. With a combination of Conqueror, Stride Breaker, and Darius's passive, you'll still deal plenty of damage. Getting 5 stacks of your passage is huge in a fight. Building a bunch of tank items like Dead Man's and Force of Nature not only increases your mobility, but also lets you live long enough to consistently activate your passive during those fights. Oh, and once again, this is another great draft mix-up that you can use to get out of a bad matchup in the top lane, or just give it a try if you're autofilled jungle. That's it for the jungle, so we'll put those builds on the screen one more time for you to check out. Next up, let's run through the mid lane. Anytime a solo laner is released, it is inevitable that someone's going to give them a try in both the mid and top lane. And although specifically designed as a top laner, Gwen has made her way into the mid lane nonetheless. Admittedly, she was off to a weak start, but Gwen began seeing much more play towards the end of patch 11.8, and a generous number of those games were in fact in the mid lane. Gwen's scaling in the mid lane is still great, just like top, but now you'll be able to take better advantage of matchups against squishier enemies. It also turns out that her W is much more useful in the mid lane, as you'll be able to play against more ranged champions there. In comparison, most top laners are melee, so it's kind of difficult to make full use of this ability, aside from just the bonus resistances. For runes, you'll run Conqueror, Triumph, Legend Tenacity, Coup de Grace, Cosmic Insight, Biscuit Delivery, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and your choice of a defensive rune. Now for items, you'll build Divine Sunderer, Defensive Boots, Nashor's Tooth, Zonia's Hourglass, Cosmic Drive, and Demonic Embrace. Gwen is built like an AP fighter. You want a mix of damage alongside durability. The extra sustain from Divine Sunderer allows you to survive longer, and therefore you can utilize your passive more. Gwen's Q and E cooldowns are already rather low, especially past the mid game, so by the time you finish Divine Sunderer, you'll be able to apply Spellblade effect off cooldown. Oh, and the bonus 400 health really goes a long way as well. As a melee champion, being able to survive upfront bursts is crucial. But a lot of people are still struggling on Gwen, so if you find that you're one of them, don't worry, it's natural. She's new and she's kind of tricky. We got tons of coaches over at ProGuides.com that are actually putting in work trying to learn Gwen for you. So if you want to learn Gwen but you're struggling on your own, go sign up with one of our coaches and they can walk you through the steps. But regardless, that'll cover our mid lane builds, so make sure to take one last look at the screen for that final recap. Next up, let's go through the bottom lane. The final 2 builds that we got today is actually for a fasting Senna duo. What's different about this one, though, is that it's not Senna and Tahm Kench, and it's not Senna and Cho'Gath. Nope, this one is instead Senna and Heimerdinger. Although admittedly an odd combination, I'd argue that giving farm to a support was a little more meta-breaking. That aside, this duo is packed with tons of poke damage and also scales really well. In cases where you need to wrap up a team composition with magic damage, there's always the option of having an AP bottom lane carry. This often goes forgotten though, as most players prefer having a marksman on their team to help them take down turrets and burn through neutral objectives. Well, guess what? Heimerdinger does that too, as he melts through Baron and Dragon, while Senna's long range ensures that you'll be able to get at least a couple hits in every time you crash a minion wave into the enemy turret. Ultimately, this duo's long range and the fact that Senna can help protect Heimerdinger survive a little bit longer make them a very solid duo, especially after level 6. Trying to focus and blow up a Heimerdinger is always going to be a risky move, because if unsuccessful, you now gotta face the wrath of an upgraded turret. Senna makes this even harder as her ultimate shields Heimerdinger, and she can also heal him up with Q. In a duo lane, Heimerdinger also has a support running an extra summoner spell like Heal or Exhaust. All lanes are made way harder in the duo lane, and therefore, Senna and Heimerdinger are free to poke their enemies with long range for the vast majority of the laning phase. For Heimerdinger's build, you want to run Arcane Comet, Mana Flow Band, Transcendence, Scorch, Perfect Timing, Biscuit Delivery, Double Adaptive Force, and your choice of defensive stat. The items are going to be Leandri's Anguish, Sork's Shoes, Zonia's Hourglass, Void Staff, Rabadon's Deathcap, and Morellonomicon. And if you're playing the Senna side of this combo, you'll still run Glacial Augment, Biscuit Delivery, Approach Velocity, Presence of Mind, Legend Bloodline, Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and your choice of a defensive stat rune. Finally, you start off with a Spectral Sickle, and then build into Kraken Slayer, Boots of Swiftness, Quincy's Rageblade, Mana Mune, and a Rapid Fire Cannon. So there's our build for bottom and support. Take one last look at the screen if you're interested in trying it out. And that'll conclude our Korean builds for patch 11.9. Thanks so much for watching, really hope you enjoyed it, and let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you try out one of these builds and like it, I want to hear about it too. Also make sure to check out the description for a link to join our Discord. It'd be awesome to have you on the server. Until next time, as always, best of luck on the Rift, everybody. Stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time.